Welcome, everybody. My name is Franco Aurelio. I'm here with Lily Kate. Oh my gosh, how did this happen? Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Lily, and I'm a super anti-feminist.
Quite the entrance, Okay. I don't know how my followers, well, I mean, they're Catholic, so they're probably going to be chill with it for the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, so Lily, I brought her on, just wanted to talk about a few controversial things, really, especially on a focus on feminism. So, in a quick summary, what would you say like the key points are to your views on feminism?
Feminism has devolved into an anti-family, anti-life, Marxist ideology that has been bought out by materialism.
Okay. By materialism? How so?
Well, you see now women are kind of measuring their power or their worth as a human being as how much stuff they can have, how much jewelry they can buy themselves, that they have a private jet. I mean, you see this with like, especially the rise of pop culture and then kind of the shift into rap culture. I mean, what you're seeing is people are just like so obsessed with having money. And also in a materialist sense, if a woman is climbing the corporate ladder, naturally the higher she gets on the ladder, the more she's able to pay and the more she gets paid and the more she's leveraged in her, she can leverage against either the government or, the company in what she's worth. And so you see a lot of women pursuing material gains just for the sake of material gains because they think it's going to give them the perception of being more powerful and able to dominate over more men, and domination really is the motivating factor of feminism.
For sure. Domination. So, because usually I know in Catholicism we talk about how men and women are complementary, right? I mean, Christianity in general just usually accepts this, that men and women are complementary, right? We were made in the image of God, but we were made to complement each other. So, how do you think, like, you talk about feminism being pretty much making it so that it's like more of a dominating culture rather than finding that sort of the balance, right? Yeah. So how would you say like there are some examples of how feminism kind of pits men and women against each other rather than trying to complement each other?
Oh, I actually want to go back to Genesis 2 and 3, because when Eve is cursed, when we were kids, we probably learned that it was just pain in childbirth, and that was it, right? And for a kid brain, that's easy to understand. But when you go back and read it, I mean, the English translations aren't great. I'm going to be honest, of course, but the second part of Eve's curse is your desire will be for your husband. Now, that doesn't mean she's going to be attracted to him. It's your desire will be for the position that he has to dominate over, to control. And so I think feminism is the institutionalization of Eve's curse in that way. So starting with that framework, pretty much with dating culture now, with marriage, 80% or more of divorces are initiated by a woman. I mean, we're seeing tearing apart of the families simply because there are not strong marriages and women are being pitched against men. You could literally look at almost any facet of relationship that men and women are required to have in society, and you see that feminism has probably done something to distort it and screw it up. So let's just talk about dating culture for a second.
Go ahead.
I mean, you have these women who are going on TikTok and saying, I deserve all of this, except I'm not going to do the things that would be required of me to demand such a high value man. For example, there's this one TikTok that went viral recently of this girl saying, I want a man who is chivalrous, who's a gentleman, who opens doors for me, who pays for meals, the whole 9 yards of what every girl wants, and her basic, green flags for dating. And then she says, but I am angry because I can only find that kind of behavior and characteristics in dating when the guy is also politically conservative. And she said, I'll give you the TikTok because we should play it. And she says, I'm not willing to give up my liberal views as a woman. And then she goes on this whole, I don't want to be controlled and I want to be autonomous. She goes on to say, I think I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. So feminism has created just this, one thing that feminism has done has created this entitlement in women where they want to demand their man to be perfect and make 12 figures a year, have no emotional baggage, and can cook and clean, and is really nice, and they're not willing to do any of the things that would make them a high-value woman.
Right. I think it's like a lack of wanting to be accountable as well on their behalf, which I think that honestly, I do, of course, it's unfortunate. We want to make sure to put blame where blame is due, but at the same time, I can't deny the fact that I think that if men were more dominant and more firm and kind of were better at communicating this sort of stuff to the women in our society, we wouldn't largely be seeing this. I know like a lot of men online tend to like immediately go for like, oh yeah, no, it's the women's fault and stuff. I'm like, me personally, I'm like, well, listen, if you're masculine enough, she will submit, right? Because like women, I do think that women like naturally are just like really attracted to masculinity.
More
when
agreeable. Women have a lot more positive emotions, therefore they're more likely to agree. But who started emasculating the men?
The men, what'd you say? Or
who started emasculating the men?
Emasculating the men. I would say men.
I'd say it's the women.
Okay.
Because all of a sudden they said, so, and here's the historical context. The Industrial Revolution happened.
Okay.
And the economy was centered around the house, the home, for all of human history. So then Industrial Revolution happens and factories and urban life start kind of ticking up.
Right.
Men travel out to go to factories. Women go out to go to factory jobs and things like that.
Yeah.
So for the first time in history, people were asking the question, or women specifically were asking the question, well, dang, I guess I don't have the same rights as my husband because he's not here.
Yeah.
And I'm not playing as vital of a role in the economy as I was. So that's really where the idea of women are asking these questions, why do I not have the same rights? Why do I not have this? Why do I not have that? Which feminism is an outgrowth of that. So I would say the Industrial Revolution and all of its consequences, for sure. But women
have been a disaster.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, women were the ones who started asking those questions, and then trying to dominate over men and use their muscle over men, which started to emasculate men because men's worst fear is getting rejected or beaten over the head by a woman, and so they're going to try and make us happy.
I totally understand like where that's coming from, and I do largely agree with it as well. The one part that I would also add into that, I would say, is that of course there were like the feminist movement, the suffragists, they were like a very small minority. However, like I don't think that they would have gained the power that they had if the men in power didn't let them do that. I think that is because like so again, I do agree with the fact that like it was these women trying to dominate men, and like essentially they kind of, in a sense, they did start it, but I think men essentially were the ones that enabled it to happen on large scale.
Well, only because men at that time were the ones who had power. So I mean, you can't grant power if you don't have it.
Fair enough. There you go. Fair enough. So with that, like I would say that this is why I'm very against simping, personally. Like I'm really, really against simping. For those that don't know what simping is, for all the boomers out there, it's pretty much just like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the definition that I usually go by is that a man that tries to like do a bunch of things for a woman, even though the woman is like has shown repeatedly not to reciprocate feelings towards him, right? So you kind of look at this with like simps that are like for abortion. They're like, oh, she'll like me if I agree with her on killing her babies or stuff like that.
I pay for it.
Yeah. I essentially think that like if we fix up the masculinity in this country, we could largely see a large turnaround, because again, men are leaders. We are the ones that are to lead this nation. So I personally just don't think that. I mean, no offense, but women, of course, women will follow whatever is getting promoted in the mainstream. Sure, there could be some original ideas and some leaders that emerge from it, but I think at the end of the day, it is going to be men that it's on their responsibility to be able to take back the culture and pretty much dominate once more with righteous values this time, hopefully. But I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
I have a couple thoughts. So one, I have grown up in a world where femininity is one of the only things that can inspire masculinity, and then masculinity is one of the only things that can inspire femininity. So I wish it was easier to say, oh, it'll come from this side first. It'll come from the men first and it'll inspire the women, or it'll come from the women first and it'll inspire the men. I don't think it's that simple.
Okay.
I think it's going to have to come from both, because if you're, I mean, 100%, like if you're going to try and put a woman in a masculine shaped box, it's never going to work. And the same goes for the inverse of that. And so, yes, it has to come from the men, but it also just as much has to come from the women.
The men have to lead, but the women actually have to follow it.
Well,
I would say.
Right.
How do you want to put it?
Right. Well, yeah, like we were saying earlier, men's purpose is to civilize nature. Women's purpose is to civilize men. So in terms of who's fixing, if women try and civilize nature, it's not going to work.
Right.
And if men try to civilize women, well, unfortunately, that hasn't worked very well. If you haven't noticed, women have been oppressed, but we are very easy to oppress a lot of the times.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I guess like I totally agree with like the fact that like again with the complementary part, and I honestly this might be a bit of a hot take with a lot of traditional circles. So if you're a rat trot following me on this, please listen with open ears. But I honestly, personally, as misogynist as a lot of people think I am, which of course, I'm not misogynist, by the way. By definition, misogyny by definition means to think that women are inferior to men, and misandry means to think that men are inferior than women. I don't think that. I'm sexist. That's what I am. That means that you like.
Hey, at least he's honest.
Yeah, there you go. I'm sexist, which simply means you have prejudice towards a certain sex. I mean, given like both sexes are different, so it's pretty much just logic. You're gonna have prejudgment towards a sex because you already know how they're, a sex does act a certain way. At least they should strive to at least. But anyways, let's get to the general discussion. We can talk about that if you want. But what I wanted to say with the controversial take is that I think that one of the things that can really inspire men to be a lot more holy and a lot more just righteous in general, I've seen. Again, this country is overrun by simps, but I genuinely do think that if men were to, if we were to see more women, now hold on, more women in positions of influencing. Funny enough, we're at this event.
Not power. Influencing, not power?
Well, I guess influencing. I don't know if power. Theirs could be.
Just trying to clarify.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I mean influencing, I don't mean that to be synonymous with power. I mean just influencing in the sense of like
creating culture.
Like exalting good examples, right? Essentially that is because I know that with power, you have more of a control over leading a herd and whatnot. When I think of like if I see a pious woman and she has great practice, she's not shy about being online or whatever. I think that she could. I think that we should like. If we see something good, we should totally like show it off to the world and be like, look, this is the prime example of what we should be emulating. And so I think that if we hear a lot of more women speaking up against, how feminism has ruined the family, how feminism has ruined women, how it has ruined men, I think we would see a huge change in a lot of these simps, so to say, because then they're gonna be like, oh, well, I agree with you, because you're beautiful and whatever. Like they might be more likely to agree with that essentially. But also, I think that one thing that like really just melts the heart of men would be to see like a really pious woman. Because seeing pious women, it's like it's almost as if it's like oh my gosh, like you actually exist. Like I've had my mind change. One time, I've had this girl DM me on my Instagram criticizing me on like something that I posted. And at first, because in text you kind of read it in a certain way, you might get a little defensive, which I was pretty defensive on. I texted, rationally, but at the same time, I knew I was being very defensive in my head. So I was like, okay, screw it. And she was like, I would love to call. And I'm like, I'm down. All right. So we called, and when we started talking, right, I got to see her personality and how just really feminine she was. And that just like, and she didn't have to like keep talking about the argument that we had, but I just like, all right, I agree. I'll change. Screw it. I'll change it. Yeah, you got a good point. It was just the way that I said something. It wasn't like the fundamental or something, but it was the way that I said.
Yeah.
I was talking about
delivery.
It was modesty. It was talking about modesty. So.
Well, it's very hard for men in this day and age to talk about anything to do with modesty. It's very hard for them to talk about anything to do with. There is a hierarchy, and that hierarchy should be at least revered, if not upheld. You should understand that it's important. Just because you're so quickly deemed as sexist or, just
misogynist.
Yeah, part of the patriarchy, you're the problem, toxic masculinity. So, men have every right to be afraid of a woman accusing them of something in a woman getting to ruin their life. And I think that the Me Too movement is obviously the prime example of this. We've seen it over and over again. So you're right, there are issues that only women can talk about right now.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's a good thing that more women are getting involved. And I think a position of influence, and I think where you're trying to go with that is you see a unique feminine ability to build culture, to build like local culture. Like, honestly, girls, like, who wants to actually be president? Like, who actually wants to be the top CEO whose face is plastered everywhere when your company goes under? Like, we just don't want that. Obviously, women, we have ambitions, but, you know, our heart really is for harmony and to build culture and to cultivate peace. And we obviously see that exemplified in the most perfect way with Mary. She's obviously the prime example of what it means to be a reverent, humble, virtuous, culture-building woman. And so, yes, it has to come from women, but we need to be focused and have been focused more in the last, I would say, even 2 years with this anti-feminist movement, and it needs to keep going.
Okay. I like how you brought up Mary. I personally love
that. You would like that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I get it. Hey, we love Mary. By the way, Lily is not Catholic. Well, wait, you were baptized in the name of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right?
Wait, can you say that one more time?
You were baptized in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, correct?
Yeah. I'm a Reformed Baptist, but I've been baptized, yes.
So if she was properly baptized, couldn't we technically say you are I don't know how the theology on that, because I always understood, right, if you're baptized in the proper formula, you don't need to get baptized again in the Catholic Church because you already baptized.
Are you trying to tell me that I'm a Catholic and I don't know it?
Say it again?
Are you trying to tell me that I'm a Catholic and I don't know it?
What? I mean, hey, you said it, not me.
Well, the thing is, y'all get a couple of things right, and I agree on a couple points, but growing up in a Reformed Baptist household, I'm not ready yet. So
okay, but here,
check up with me in a couple years, and I might be.
A couple years? Holy smokes! A couple years? Come on.
You know how quickly time passes.
Yeah, but you seem like you're pretty smart. Well, no, smartness has nothing to do with that, actually. I take that back. Because I know, like, a lot of people can say, like, they're high. I actually have a really huge issue with the whole high IQ thing. Like, oh, yeah, high IQ, you know, I'm going to have the correct takes. It's like, no, you could be very intelligent and still be dumb. Like, you can be, like, I mean, Stalin was super intelligent, and he massacred a lot of people. Hitler was very smart as well. He massacred a lot of people. I don't think that it's about the IQ. I think it's about the heart. That's why I think that, like, it definitely does matter. Like, that's why I take it back. I'm like, wait, no. Smart, that's not it, right? Yes, there is like misconception on Catholicism that I think that people can definitely like learn about. That would, I guess, sort of play into IQ maybe to a certain extent. I don't know, but from there, I think that it really conversion, you know, following Christ, that really is a change of heart. So it really has to be like from where your heart is at, right? And if Catholicism is the religion that God wants you to follow, you're not going to get there through only intelligence, right? It plays a part. You know, you have to understand English and, you know, language or whatever, but the driving factor will be your heart, essentially.
Well, I mean, if the Catholics had it their way, it wouldn't be in English, but either, you know.
That is true. That's very true. That's very true. Look, Lily's hip. You look at that, she's hip. I feel like a lot of like Catholics, traditional Catholics, would really like you.
Yeah, I have a lot of Catholic friends, and we agree on a lot, especially issues regarding birth control or femininity or any major political issues.
Pause. Thoughts on contraception?
Oh, it should be not a thing. Well, okay, here's why. So I'm about to launch into like a real history lesson here, okay? As I was explaining earlier with the Industrial Revolution, feminism was an answer to an economic question of what do we do about women who are not paid as much? What do we do about women who are not recognized in the economy because their work is only domestic now because of, obviously, their husband goes to a factory. They're not working on farms anymore. So I'm going to say that again. Feminism was an answer to an economic question. So when birth control came out and was readily available, we all know the stuff about Margaret Sanger being super racist and hating people of color. Yes, know all that. But on a really broad, like high level, birth control was a technological answer or an advancement that became an answer to the question of why are men and women somehow unequal in terms of the economy. Now, we would say, well, obviously they don't have the same men and women don't have the same impact on the economy because women have to take time off to care for children, which is a much more important thing than making money and paying taxes.
That's true.
So, but the feminists obviously have always hated the idea that women are a different kind of person because we can have babies and we seem to enjoy it. So when birth control was readily available, it became, I'll say it again, the technological advancement to the question, or an answer to the question of equality.
Yeah.
So birth control seems to answer and say, you know what, we're going to take away one of the most fundamental parts of being a woman in the name of equality.
Yeah.
Aside from that, it like messes up your hormones and like everything else bad about birth control is obviously very true.
Yeah. It objectifies women essentially, because it's like, one of the most unique thing about the woman, the female, is that she can give life, she can give birth essentially. So once you try to make, that's why people think that might be a little too extreme when we talk about how banning contraception and how that harms the family and stuff like that. I don't know if you agree with banning contraception. I'm with it all the way. Okay, cool.
I'm not ready to fully make a statement. I just know that it has erased any legal and societal distinction between men and women. I think that's a very bad thing.
Fair enough. But yeah, anyways, when because sodomy, right? What is sodomy? It's like taking the procreation out of sex, and of course it has to do more with like homosexual acts, but you get what I'm saying when I'm talking about how if you try to, even if it's heterosexual sex, and you're trying to take away the procreative aspect, procreative possibility outside of that,
you can't split the two actions.
Yeah.
And once you do, then the whole order of creation is like totally messed up.
It's a huge insult to God. You're essentially saying like, I'm going to be my own God. I'm going to interfere with a sacred act that you have made and distort it to my own will, essentially. Now, the thing is, like, how it objectifies women is that you can get, unfortunately, this is really disgusting, so cover your ears, but you can get sexual pleasure from literally anything if you're like perverted enough, right? However, the thing that makes sex so sacred is that the possibility of procreation is always there, unless you interfere with it and make it into something perverted. That's why it objectifies women, because when the moment you take away the procreative possibility outside of it, then the woman becomes nothing but an object for sexual pleasure, essentially, because you have removed the one thing that makes the woman unique, the female anatomy unique. That's why it's like so disgusting. And I think that when people that are pro-life talk about how don't get an abortion, do contraception, it's like that's such a slippery slope, because it's like abortion is the ultimate form of contraception, right? It's like, okay, the life was already created. Okay, no, I definitely don't want it. It's the final form of taking away procreation outside of the sacred act of sex.
Yeah.
So,
and birth control, any chemical form of birth control, is a mini abortion every time that it's enacted.
The chemical what?
It's a chemical abortion. So chemical birth control is technically an abortion if you conceive, because what chemical birth control does is, you have three hormones, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone.
Okay.
Women get a big influx of progesterone, which is the hormone that basically makes your body able to support a baby. Why most miscarriages happen is because women don't have enough progesterone, okay? So what birth control does is it stops the flow and production of progesterone. So there's a baby that is conceived, and then the birth control says, we're not going to give you the progesterone, so the baby is killed. That's very, very early on, like on a very cellular level. That's what chemical birth control does.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. I only knew about like the condoms and abortion. Yeah. Of course, I didn't know about that.
Women have the little bar in their arm. You can get something injected into you, and it like puts out birth control. You can get it like replaced whenever you need to, or you can take pills. Yeah.
I will say that also needs to be banned. Of course, you won't release a statement yet, but
I'm getting closer to it, and obviously, there are lots of health reasons why you shouldn't go on birth control. It just totally destroys your hormones. And if I could give any unsolicited doctor advice, listen, I'm not a doctor, but don't interfere with your hormones. Like, you just shouldn't do that at all. Like, you can interfere with your diet, you can interfere with your sleep schedule, because those things are easy to get back on track. But if you interfere with your hormones, it's very hard to get them back on track. So I'm against it for that reason. I'm also against it morally, and I'm also against it because it erases any distinction between men and women in the eyes of the commercial market. And So I guess maybe this will be my first public statement that maybe we should.
Maybe. It's still a maybe, though. We got to get that. We got to ban it. We got to get that boldness. Come on. No, because I'm, again, I'm for, you guys already know my views. I definitely am for, I'm not shy about the banning whatever is degenerate that harms other people, essentially. Because of course, we can talk about how, well, maybe should we force people to go to mass or whatever. It's like, no, there's a difference between evil that harms yourself versus evil that harms other people, because one violates the rights of the other people. So I think that abortion, contraception, pornography, and anything else that is that harms other people, that's not just yourself, I think that definitely should be banned. And I won't try to get a statement from you, of course. So don't worry about it. It's all good. I don't think many people are gonna watch the original video, because I usually post clips of this. Yeah. And then
No,
maybe.
I'm still just thinking. Just always thinking.
Okay, cool. Okay, well.
Maybe check back with me and I might have become a Catholic, maybe.
Maybe. Who knows? Only. Listen. I don't want you to become a Catholic because of peer pressure. I want you to become a Catholic because you yourself are okay, this is where God's calling me to.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I got you.
There we go. We love a good heart, don't we, folks? We love a good heart. What's a hot take that you feel you haven't said enough times?
That I haven't said enough times. I think when people say the definition of freedom is to do whatever you want, that is so monkey brained. It's so dumb. It's clearly defined in Galatians 5:13 that freedom is the opportunity to do what you ought to do, not what you feel like doing. Galatians 5:13 says something to the effect of, God has given you freedom, but don't use that freedom to gratify the desires of the flesh and pursue your own selfish wants.
Yes.
It's to do something better. So I think Generation Z really needs to think seriously about what their definition of freedom is going to be. And then we need to act on that, because this is why we're in the state that we're in, is because for so long, the boomers and everyone who came right under them, Generation Y, and then millennials and then Gen X, y'all literally thought that the definition of freedom was, I'm going to do whatever I want and no one's going to tell me different. And it hasn't worked very well.
No, it hasn't. I think it's also because I've heard the argument from a lot of Christians that say, oh, well, didn't God give us free will? So why are you trying to place all these laws, right? You're trying to break God's free will. It's I think that's a very bad understanding of theology, of what God's will is, because God has a passive will and he has an active will. God's passive will is the will that allows for false religions to exist, that allows for evil to exist. That is the passive will. His active will is for evil to be gone completely, to be for us to be righteous, and for every single human to be saved. That doesn't mean that every human will choose salvation, but it does mean that he does sincerely want every single person to be saved, because Jesus died for every single person of all time, for eternity, essentially. So that's why I think that we have to make that distinction between passive will and active will when we come to oh, you're trying to break, you're trying to go against God's will, God give us free will, you're trying to break that. It's no, you just have a bad understanding of that, and it's not Christian to allow evil to keep on leading souls away from heaven and into hell, essentially. That's not Christian. Or leading souls away from heaven and experiencing more suffering on earth, right? Just a lot of demonic influence. I don't like the whole thing of separate church and state, and I don't know if you want to get vocal on that, but me personally, I of course think that church should be very involved in the state, because, again, the state is never going to be secular. And people that think that it's oh, the state should be secular, it's a very liberal idea, because you essentially you can't go to the final conclusion that the state will these people are so inconsistent, because they say the state should be secular, but then they vigorously oppose an atheist state, which is that's the logical conclusion of a secular state, essentially. So when we say, again, it's not about it's not about the power itself, but who is controlling the power. It's not about the state having so much power, it's about who is controlling all of that power. If you don't have an issue if Superman has all that absolute power. You don't have an issue if Superman's, having that power, but you definitely have an issue if, I don't know, his arch nemesis it would have the same amount of power. It's not about the power itself, it's about who's holding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess if we want to talk about the separation of church and state, obviously the misunderstanding is the liberals use that as you can't force your religion on me, when the actual intention of it was flipped. It was to keep the government from stopping infringing and trying to shut down the state or the church. And so I've literally stood in front of a group of 80 protesters, and I said, I'll give $1,000 to someone who can show me where the clause and the phrase separation of church and state is in the Constitution.
Yeah. Sure.
Obviously, no one could do it. And I said it's because it's in a letter that Thomas Jefferson sent to the Danbury Baptist 13 years after the Constitution was ratified, saying that there needs to be a clear separation of church and state because the Danbury Baptists were having their rights taken away by the state. And so the fact that people use that as a way to say you can't force your religion on me is like so just asinine to me. I'm just like, learn a little bit of history, learn a little bit of context. And if you had a little bit of historical context, you'd be able to see that, yeah, it's the church that needs to be protected from the government in like most cases.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that like that was the original intention, that they wanted to pretty much reduce the power that the state had on the church, I think. Yep. But now, quick question. What do you think about a Catholic theocracy? Thumbs up or thumbs down? If you had,
tell me how it would work. Tell me a little bit more.
Well, I mean, Catholicism, by the way, explicitly states that we're not to force convert anybody. We're not supposed to do that, right? So if you want to keep, being your non-denominational praise and worship group or whatever, you can keep that. We're not saying that we're going to ban that.
I can keep my church that has espresso and gives us like chacos and acoustic Jesus.
Yes, you can keep that. You can keep that. Listen, we will not ban that, I think. But I think. But what we like, again, because that's not harming anybody. It's not as simple, like, unless you're like, if somebody can make the argument, but it's harming the soul in a way. Like, yeah, you can make the argument for that, but again, it's not infringing on the rights of others.
But tell me how a Catholic theocracy should work.
So, from what I understand, Catholic theocracies tend to be monarchies. Specifically monarchies. I know that like the monarch or the supreme leader, I know that he will be essentially, ideally I would want the leader to be very involved in like submission to the Pope, because of course that's a huge thing about Catholicism, is that we are supposed to be obedient to our leaders, especially the Vicar of Christ. So I would assume that the leader would be largely obedient to the Pope and very much work together with the papacy, with Rome, with the magisterium, have like counseling from priests and all that stuff, right? I would want to see, like, I think a Catholic theocracy would also have like a bunch of schools that are more influenced in Catholicism, because of course Catholic, like for example, sex, right? I saw a tweet about this, and it talks about like, the whole right-wing position of we should not talk about sex in schools or whatever. It's like, well, no, Catholic schools still teach about sex, but they just talk about how it's sacred, how it's meant for marriage, how it's meant for procreation, and all that. Like that's
theology of the body.
Theology of the body. You already know. Have you read that paper, by the way?
No, my boyfriend grew up in a Catholic school, so.
There you go. Look at that.
But he's Presbyterian. It wasn't the school that chased him away. It's just he has a Presbyterian family.
So he believes in fish, right?
What?
Oh wait, no, that's Episcopalian. My bad.
I don't know about fish.
Okay, cool. Well, anyways, like we would want to see more Catholicism in schools. Talk about that, right? That's not forced converting anybody. That's just being like, hey, that's what we're going to teach in schools.
Having an institutionalized moral standard. So would the monarch also have a parliament underneath them that would help make the laws, or would it just be the monarch and then the dukes and duchesses taking advice from the priests? Because it would be interesting to see how a church with priests could also be working at the same time as a monarchy with a parliament.
Well, priests aren't supposed to get involved in politics, actually.
But you said that they would be like an advisor.
Advisors, yeah, but I would mean that more for spiritual counseling. Sorry, I should have clarified. Okay. So for spiritual counseling, essentially, because the leader, of course, if your spirituality is not right, you're probably not going to lead very well. So I would say that have the priest as spiritual counselors, pretty good priests. I would say at that. I mean, in my experience, majority of priests have been pretty good. So really, just any. But yeah, we can get into the specifics and stuff like that. But again,
I just didn't know, because there's a lot of ways that you can't do it. There's also a lot of ways that could work if the society was ready for it. So if the society's ready for it, then
I don't think we'll ever see it in America. At least not in our lifetimes.
no, definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, people's tiny nutshell understanding of history is America happened because King bad.
Yeah, that's true. So, but my question was more on like, would you be thumbs up or thumbs down on a Catholic theocracy?
Is there a sign to learn more?
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
I'm going to be a really good politician one day.
Yeah, she kept dodging my questions. That's pretty much it. We'll probably do something else with Kate in the future. Maybe we can like talk about Catholicism, Protestantism in the future, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't like heated debates though. I like just chillaxed dialogue, conversation, stuff like that. Cool. Because I do think that Kate does have she's genuinely interested, genuinely trying to seek the truth. So maybe keep that energy. Hopefully, don't switch up on me, okay?
No promises. And if you actually enjoyed our conversation, put it in the comments and we'll do it again.
There you go. I'll leave all of Lily's stuff down in the description, all her links, Instagram, all that social media stuff. Cool stuff. So go make sure to check her out, and I'll put my stuff down there as well. So thank you guys so much for joining. Have a good one. Stay holy. Bye-bye.